We are back. This is the Shillan and Duffy show on the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network and the Sherdog Radio Network. We are recapping UFC Thompson versus Neal, aka UFC Vegas 17. I am your host. My name is Keith Shillan. I'm a writer for Sherdog.com and the executive producer of the Loudmouth Podcast Network. And joining me, as always, is, of course, the senior editor of Sherdog.com, Mr. Ben Duffy. Ben, this is the last one of the year. Is that sad news or is that exciting news?
You know, it's a little sad. It's a little exciting. I mean, I will, of course, be checking in for Ryzen's, last card of the year. But, as far as the UFC and North American promotions, we're done. And it almost just feels like as a sport and as people who work in the space, we survived something. We got through. And yeah, it's a strange feeling. In March, in May, in July, it was really up in the air what this year was going to look like as a year in combat sports. I just feel like until kind of like that last home stretch of a couple months, everything was up in the air. And then finally it was like, okay, we're just going to bust this out with 24 straight cards in a row or whatever it was. But yeah, we're across the finish line, man. We're going to talk about this and then take a couple weeks to do other stuff and come back at it next year.
Yeah, I think anything. So most of my work for MMA is really North American based from the assignments I have. But I think back on the Contender Series, that's probably the thing that I spend the most in-depth study on and most time consuming. And when I hit the last episode, I really do have torn feelings because I enjoy doing it, so I'm sad that it's over. But then a part of me is relieved because now I have so much more time on my hands to do other things. So that's kind of feel like going into the break, I'll be like, oh man, now I have a little bit more time on my hands. But comes next Saturday, I'll be missing watching fights.
Sure.
So let's get right into it. I think I can say for both of us, we talk about 2020 being so different, but beginning of 2021 is going to be a lot similar than 2020. We're going to have, social distancing. We're going to have COVID tests. How long that's going to last, neither one of us know. Nobody in the world knows, but definitely neither one of us know. But like always, we're going to have cancellations. That's exactly what happened in this card. From when we taped our preview, which we taped late Wednesday night, 3 different fights were canceled. I believe all 3 was COVID related. Those 3 was Draco Rodriguez versus Eamon Zahabi, Carl Robinson versus Dolce Lingambula, and the third one was Rick Glenn versus Carlton Minus. Luckily for us, Carlton Minus got a new opponent in Christoph Jagos, so we saved one of the 3.
Luckily for us, not so much for Minus, but we'll get there.
Let's start right from the top. In the main event, we had a battle of strikers. Stephen Thompson versus Jeff Neal. Stephen Thompson won a unanimous decision with a clean sweep, getting 50-45 on all 3 scorecards. I mean, this was an absolute whitewashing. Stephen Thompson put on a clinic. What's your thoughts?
Completely agree. And I say that as someone who picked Neal in this fight, but it was a clinic. Stephen Thompson doesn't really lose striking battles. I've spent much of the fight first appreciating the extent to which I was wrong about how it was going to look and being impressed with Stephen Thompson, but realizing that, okay, you look at Stephen Thompson's losses. He lost to Anthony Pettis in a fight where he was basically doing this to him, just schooling him until Pettis did this insane jumping Superman punch off the cage and flatlined him. That is fantastic. That is an all-time highlight for Pettis, but that is not a repeatable game plan for beating Stephen Thompson, not even for Anthony Pettis. They fight 5 times. Anthony Pettis doesn't pull that off every time, and Pettis was getting schooled. He lost to Darren Till. Darren Till in Till's hometown, Till 4 pounds overweight, and I still thought Thompson won the fight. The only person who's really stopped The only people who've really stopped Thompson from doing Thompson things are people who had him scared of the takedown, mostly Tyron Woodley. It's why Woodley had success, and it's why those fights were completely dreadful. Like, at least the second fight was completely dreadful. But even at 30, is he 38 now? Even at 38, even with a couple losses in his last few fights, if you're just going to try to bring your kickboxing game against his kickboxing game, he still might be the best striker in the UFC. I know there's some recency bias there, but dude, I hate the cliche that there are levels to this, but I thought of Jeff Neal as one of the better strikers in the welterweight division. I still think he is, and he had nothing for Stephen Thompson.
Yeah, I mean, he entered the fight as a favorite. We both picked him to win, I believe. I know I picked him to win either first or second round knockout. I think you had him win by knockout too, right?
No, I had him by decision.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so
but
you had him by
I
decision,
thought,
and I had him by knockout.
Yep.
And yeah, we were utterly wrong. And it was one of those ones. About 1 minute in, I was like, "What the hell? Like, what a terrible pick that was!" Like, it was a minute in, and at that point, I said, his only shot is a Hail Mary punch. Like, he's got to connect clean and knock him out. Because at that point, I was like, "Decision's out. A decision is absolute out." Because Stephen Thompson's got to stop just confusing him with shots, and it's just what continued on. So now we talk about the guys who've had success with Stephen Thompson. You brought this up on the feet recently. You go all the way back to Matt Brown, forever ago. But Tyron Woodley, and even this is starting to not get really recent, but Tyron Woodley and Darren Till. And the thing that stands out to me in both of those is Stephen Thompson had so much respect for the power of those guys that his volume was way down. And it seems like when he had this break and he came back, he completely changed up his style where he's like, yeah, I understand these guys might hurt me, but I only lose this way. Now, obviously, there's the Anthony Pettis knockout, but I 100% agree with you. I think it was just a lucky shot. As much as I hate saying that, obviously it was something he threw, something he saw, but he throws it 10 times, only one of them is knocking him out. So this Stephen Thompson that we saw tonight that had high volume is a real, real problem. They talked on the broadcast about his takedown defense, how good it is. I'm not ready to crown him champion. It would still very surprise me if he won the title one day, being that he's 38. But suddenly it's not completely out of the realm of possibility as it was if you asked me 1 hour ago before he stepped in the cage.
I agree. I mean, again, we both picked Neal in this fight, and I picked Neal partly because I believe in Neal, and I still do, but also partly because I expected Thompson to be slower and more gun shy than he was. You made the point about his volume. It was absolutely on point, and you're right. He was fearless. I mean, something happened to jack up his knee in the fourth round. Fifth round, he goes out there. The movement is gone. The kicks are gone, and he just basically stands in the pocket and boxes with Jeff Neal for a round. If you told me going into the fight that, hey, Thompson's going to jack up his knee and he's just going to have to stand toe-to-toe with Neal for a round, I would have picked Neal even knowing that it was 4 rounds to none going in. What a fantastic performance.
Yeah, I mean, the things that stood out to me was his volume, but also the variety of his attacks, and he had Jeff Neal chasing him, but he wasn't chasing him, unmatched without anything coming at him. He was walking into punches the entire time, and Stephen Thompson was just throwing things in his face or going to his body. That's Jeff Neal had to be on defense the whole time, and any single time Thompson stopped throwing, and I think the broadcast team pointed this out. Anytime Stephen Thompson stopped throwing, he was already gone before Jeff Neal landed. And one thing I'll say, yeah, Jeff Neal landed shots, but I feel like a lot of times when a guy's way ahead, we start getting exaggerating the shots getting landed, because he was never hurt. Anytime Jeff Neal landed a shot, they pretend oh, that was such a big shot. Oh my God, this is when Jeff Neal needs to come in. And I'm like, I get it. They're trying to sell a fight a little bit, trying to sell excitement. I didn't feel that way at all. Stephen Thompson just was there's levels in striking. You said, he might be the best striker in the UFC. I don't know if I would call that. I think I might give that to Israel Adesanya. But as the John Franklin, who I used to do the recap show, said, he's in the club. Like, he's not. If he's knocking on the door, they'll let him in.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Anything particular what he was doing out there really stand out to you?
It's the most basic thing in the world. Well, it's the most basic thing in the world to say, but relatively few strikers are able to keep their opponent guessing just by going to different levels, like high, middle, and low. Like he had Neal keeping a really high guard just a little ways into the first round, like just by throwing head kicks, and throwing counters and just basically running Neal onto his punches as he came in. And as Neal's guard went high, Thompson started hitting him to the body. Some of those body kicks were, I mean, he's always had good kind of side kicks, to the body that I think I said on the preview. He kind of uses them the same way a boxer uses a jab. Just stop the other guy's forward progress, just establish your range. But, he was also throwing kicks with the back leg that were hard, that he doesn't always do. Like, he'll use a head kick as a finisher, but he landed a lot of body kicks there. And if Neal started reacting to those and dropping his guard, then he'd go back upstairs. It's the simplest thing to say, but you rarely see it done that effectively.
Yeah, two other things really stood out to me. One is, as you mentioned earlier, he was sitting on his punches, but he was sitting on his punches when Neal was coming towards him. Something I kind of pointed out a little bit on our preview show when I kept saying he'll get you chasing to a point, and then he attacks that point that he knows you're going to be at next. But was really impressed me. He wasn't just jabbing to that. He started sitting on his punches, and then he would land the power shots. And then when it's like, okay, now it's Jeff's turn to strike back, that he's already hit his escape. The also thing that I really liked was how flawless he moves from, that's another thing we talked about in the preview, is how he switches from stance to stance so flawlessly. But what I like about it is when he switches, say he's in the orthodox and he switches to southpaw, a lot of times what happens is guys will switch stances and there's like a moment of a pause where you have to tell your brain, like, okay, now my right hand is my jab hand, now my left hand is my power, and you have to, like, your brain has to tell you, like, all right, settle in, this is what you're going to do. And so does your opponent. Your opponent has a second where he's got to, okay, now, same thing, now his right hand is his jab hand. What I love about Stephen Thompson is he switches it and goes right into an offense. He just flows with it. And that just shows a level and just the amount of hours he's been able to do that. And he was confusing. It seemed like Jeff was just freezing when he'd do that. And it was just like he'd have to hide behind his high guard. And that's why you saw so many combinations from Thompson, because Jeff was like frozen in time for moments. Just an incredible. To be able to do this, as you mentioned, at 38 years old, at this level, like, this is not a heavyweight that we see. This is a welterweight. This is a welterweight that, let's be honest, a lot of us, when he got knocked out by Anthony Pettis, I mean, we were writing his eulogy.
Yep. And, just in the interest of accuracy, he does not turn 38 until February. He's still 37. But, yeah, he's
37
way up there.
Yep. 10 months. Like, he's up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question. And I don't know if I like it, but he's 37. We've seen him fight for the title. He's never been a guy that's a huge push, but he's well liked, if that makes sense. Like, there's nobody who dislikes Stephen Thompson. I mean, how can you? It'd be like saying something bad about Mr. Rogers. The guy's like so like he doesn't come off, and I'm not accusing him of this, but some people call who's the guy that the blonde hair with the spiky hair? I can't think of his name. Similar personality, Stephen Thompson.
Sage Northcutt.
Yeah, like the nicest guy alive, but a lot of people say he comes off very fake. That, like, Stephen Thompson to me does not come off. I don't think Sage Northcutt does either. I think that's really his personality. But a lot of people accuse him of coming off fake. Like, Stephen Thompson doesn't seem like Stephen Thompson seems like if he was your neighbor, you'd be like the dream neighbor.
Oh, absolutely. And for what it's worth, Sage Northcutt, I've interviewed him before. He is from Houston, so I know a lot of people who know him. I know, a friend of mine fought him as an amateur. He is that guy. Like he's not.
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
But
I wasn't a huge. I've seen people like
Yeah.
people like to hate on people like to hate on Sage Northcutt. A lot of that has to do with his look, his spiky hair, he's a good looking guy. Plus, a lot of people believe a lot of things were given to him at a young age. Whatever. We're not good. I don't want to go down a Sage Northcutt rant. But yeah, Stephen Thompson. Like I even said on the broadcast, I think this guy, man. I know he's pretty open about his faith, and that's what forms his personality. Like he's just a guy that's hard to root against. Like I didn't even like picking against him on the broadcast because of his personality. I don't know. So my question is, I said all that big ramp up was this good for the UFC for Stephen Thompson to win?
I think so.
Okay.
He's a bigger name than Neal. He's much older. So Neal has time to bounce back from this and make a title run. I still think Neal is probably a future, at least like long-time top 10 guy. Yeah, I don't think this will be the last we've heard of him, but time is of the essence with Thompson. He's almost 38. He just took a year off because he got hurt in his last fight. So they can strike while the iron is hot, because he's been gone for a while. There's a plenty of interesting things they can do with him in terms of matchmaking going forward. And he's a big enough name that even some guys that are technically ranked higher than him probably won't squawk about getting a Thompson fight.
Yeah, totally. So I kind of had two reactions, like the short term versus the long term. Short term, I actually think it is a good thing, because the window for him to be successful is just still very short, and also he's fought in some big pay-per-views, so a lot of fans, he's not Conor McGregor or anything like that, but a lot of fans knows who he is. Casual fans might know who he is. He's very likable. He has an exciting style when he's doing this, wheel kicks and axe kicks and all kind of stuff that he does. But also, I agree with something you kind of said. You kind of mentioned like Jeff Neal's not done. I don't think this was it was not a great performance by any chance, but this is not career ending. He's still probably a top 15 welterweight. You still have two guys moving forward instead of just one if Jeff Neal won and then Stephen Thompson's done. Now in the long run, it might have been better for Jeff Neal to win because you have, fresh face, newer guy, exciting team, exciting style, a big knockout guy. But overall, I think it's good. Now, you mentioned there's a lot of things for Stephen Thompson going forward. I think being in a main event always gives you that. Like when you win a main event, it's suddenly like that week people are calling you on Twitter. There's always something. You get a little more shine winning in a main event. So let's start with Stephen Thompson. If you're booking his next opponent and no one can say no, what are you doing?
Well, he's still a two-time former title challenger, and he's just beaten in Neal and previous to that, Vicente Luque, two borderline top 15 guys. He can't take a step back from there. Honestly, my perfect matchup would be if the UFC would get over the stupid idea of making Leon Edwards fight Khamzat Chimaev. I would love to see Edwards versus Thompson. Edwards is a very good striker. He's also an underratedly good offensive wrestler and top control guy. And, kind of like I said at the top of the show, the guys that are able to make Thompson worry about the takedown are some of the ones that have helped slow that freight train a little bit. I would also be fine with him taking on someone like Michael Chiesa. But yeah, I think he's earned a top 10 guy. And like I said, because of his name value, I think some top 10 guys wouldn't complain at having to fight him.
Yeah, so based on, having already fought guys like Tyron Woodley and Vicente Luque, those guys are out. Other guys are booked, like you mentioned, Edwards and Chimaev is booked. Obviously, Burns and Usman are booked. Not that I was saying that he should get a title shot. It doesn't seem like it's booked yet, but the UFC wants to do Covington, Masvidal, which to me is a no-brainer. So when you kind of leave who's left in the rankings, it really comes down to two guys. You mentioned one of them, Michael Chiesa, and the other guy, Neal Magny. Like, I would do one of those two matchups, like whichever guy wants it. And then, unfortunately, the third guy kind of gets left out.
Yeah, but, the third guy might have different options.
Yeah. No, I just meant of those three guys. Yeah,
Yeah.
the third guy.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, once you start taking in, oh well, Thompson fought these guys. This guy had to fought that guy. Yeah, obviously something opens up. But let's go over to Neal. We both said we don't think he's done, but obviously this hurts. I'll go first this time. I'd match him up with Santiago Ponzinibbio. It's one of those guys who's been out forever. You kind of forget about the guy because of that. I mean, he's been out over 2 years. That's the fight I would do. What would you do with Jeff Neal?
I like Ponzinibbio just fine as a matchup. If Ponzinibbio still isn't able to come back, I'd also be fine with someone like Jin Lang Lee, Tim Means, someone like that.
You want to get your boy Tim Means killed, huh?
He might surprise us.
Yeah. Speaking of surprise, I was not that surprised in my bold pick, my lock of the night. It came. I was sweating it out a little bit heading into the third round, but Jose Aldo beat Marlon Chitovera by unanimous decision. Actually, let me ask you this. We didn't do this already, so before I move on, was this the fight of the night? Do we have results?
Well, if you're asking me factually, it's right here on the front page.
I'm thinking it's either this one or the main event. Because I mean, this was a close back and forth.
Nope.
The main event had moments.
No
Was
fight of the night. We
There was
got
no
Thompson,
Okay.
Rob Font, Marcin Tybura, and Jimmy Flick. Get your
Okay. I'm
performance
okay with
of the
that. There was nothing really jumped out for fight of the night, so I'm okay. So Jose Aldo finally picked up a win in the bantamweight division. I think he showed that he has something left.
Oh my goodness, did he ever?
I mean, Marlon Chitovera is, he's a good fighter. I never viewed him as a title challenger, but that next tier down, Jose Aldo was able to defeat that next tier. The one issue with me, and I'm going to talk about all the good things that Jose Aldo did because I think there's a lot of good things. But what will keep Jose Aldo still talking about winning a title and all this, and it's one of those, I feel, former veteran or veteran former champion like Anthony Pettis, similar, talking about winning a title, getting the title like we had Tito Ortiz for years talk about getting this title back. It's just not going to happen. The big thing is to me is Jose Aldo's volume, and it was nothing that was great in his heyday, but his volume is weaning and his cardio is weaning. That's a major issue to me.
Yep. He's never been a high volume guy. In fact, I was comparing him to Davidson Figueiredo a couple weeks ago in just the kind of different ways that different fighters manage their gas. He's always been a guy who knew his gas tank was limited, and that's how he's managed it, just with very, very measured volume. And during his heyday, throwing 10 strikes around was enough because those 10 strikes were killing people.
So let me give you my overall assessment of this fight, because I don't think there's too much to take away. You tell me what you agree with, what you disagree with, and then add on anything you'd like to. I feel like we had, and this is maybe why this is my favorite fight of the evening, I feel like we had a little bit of everything. Like we had the best of both guys. And what I mean by that is we saw the best striking of Jose Aldo. It's that stand right in front of you, hold your ground, dig to the body, add the leg kicks, have power, like that. We saw all of that. What I thought we had the best of Marlon Vera on the feet, which is high volume, work positioning, beat you with cardio. So I thought we had a little bit of that. Flip it to the ground. We had Jose Aldo, which we hardly ever see, but we forget this is a decorated Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, flash some BJJ in the third round. The only difference is we did not see the best of Marlon Vera on the ground, and that was, to me, was the difference of the fight.
I'm with you. I was very impressed by Aldo's performance. I expected him to do well. I expected Vera to win a close fight. I just, based on Aldo's last couple of fights, I expected that he was more physically dilapidated than he is. He looked really good, man. Just, he's he's made intelligent concessions to advancing age in a lot of ways. I did love that he embraced the leg kicks again in a way he has not in a while. I love that he did. It just seemed like the most intelligent thing in the world to go into the third round and say, at worst, this is 1 round apiece. You know, I actually had it 2 rounds for Aldo. I scored all 3 rounds for Aldo, but he had to know at worst it's 1 round apiece. I can take this guy down, and if I can take him down, I don't think he can get back up, and that's exactly what he did. It didn't make for a sizzling round, but that's just, I mean, that's as fight IQ, just as straightforward as it comes. He's a great grappler. He is an Andre Pedernera's black belt. His offensive wrestling, rarely used, but clearly an underrated skill set. I'm trying to remember a time he's ever tried to get a fight to the ground and it didn't work. It's hilarious to me because unless I misunderstood him, DC on the broadcast was like, he comes from that camp, so he's going to be a great striker. And if he was talking about Jose Aldo at Nova União, that is seriously like a camp of like 50 grapplers and Jose Aldo.
Yeah. I think he's confusing him more with like Shootbox or Rafael Cordero and King
like,
MMA. Yeah,
he and briefly Marlon Sandro were the guys that broke the idea that Nova União was a bunch of grapplers who couldn't strike. That's it.
I mean, even they take like, oh god, I can't think of the name. The guy who was his little partner there, Diego Brandao. When he first arrived on the scene, he was known for his grappling, and then he became a great striker. It wasn't the other way around. It wasn't the other way around. I'm sorry that I feel like lately I've been having such a hard time thinking of people's names. So there's a lot of things you said that I really, really enjoyed. One, you mentioned the leg kicks. This is like something that Jose Aldo has brought back. Like he's resurrected his leg kicks the last couple of fights. Like there was a long stretch where he just completely abandoned his leg kicks, and suddenly they're back. So I like that. We mentioned the wrestling and the offensive grappling. Like when was the last time he used his offensive grappling? Was it like the one that the fight? Now there might be something in between, but the fight I remember is the Mark Hominick fight.
Yeah,
I mean, was that really the last time we saw like Jose Aldo? Have a.
It's definitely the last time he used it to dominate a fight.
Yeah.
Like he might have shot some takedowns in between then and now, but that's the last time I remember him going, okay, this guy is a pretty hot kickboxer. I could outstrike him, but there's no way he can, keep me off him on the ground. So I'm going to sew up the fight, especially in the later rounds, just by taking him down. Yeah,
and didn't Aldo have staph infection for that fight, or during camp or something like that? It was staph infection, which is a big reason why he went to a wrestling, game plan.
I do not remember, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, I actually I vaguely remember, but I think that was the case. The other thing that stands out to me in this fight is so I had it 1-1 heading the third. You had it 2-0 for Jose Aldo. But one thing we really talked about during the preview is we both kind of conceded that the first round was going to be Jose Aldo, the third round was going to be Marlon Vera, and we kind of both said like who wins the second round. I thought Aldo could hold on to the second round. You said no, it's going to change. When I saw it change about midway or whatever it was, I was like, oh man, it changed too early. He's going to lose that round now. The biggest surprise is I don't think anybody saw him coming out wrestling the third round. Like I expected him to be standing there and just kind of get picked a piece with volume, kind of similar to like the Volkanovski fight, and just kind of like look like hunched over at the fight ends, like that sad look on his face, and that was not the case. Absolutely brilliant. Anything else you want to talk about this fight before we do some matchmaking?
I'm just gonna give my recency bias hot take. I don't even want to talk about the greatest of all time thing just because, then we're talking about strength of schedule, accomplishment, this and that. But sometimes I look at Jose Aldo and I think this is the best fighter we've ever had. Just there's no part of the MMA skill set that he does not do very well.
Yeah, I mean, the issue is, and I totally understand where you're coming from. Like, there is not a glaring weakness with Jose Aldo.
Right.
Like, you take not that anybody was putting him in the all-time great, but I think about a champion that was a champion at the same time as Jose Aldo is a guy we actually saw tonight, Anthony Pettis, and there was glaring weaknesses to this game.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the case. Go to like an all-time great. Randy Couture is my all-time favorite fighter when I was a fan instead of a media member. There was glaring weaknesses in Randy Couture's game. Chuck Liddell, that was not the case with Jose Aldo. The only issue, even look at Anderson Silva, there's a glaring weakness in his game.
Sure.
The only issue when I think about the top, where you want to rank guys, and we're not going to go down that path either, but the guys who are in the discussion of all-time greats, they kind of all feel that same way to me, other than maybe an Anderson Silva. You got John Jones, you have George St. Pierre, you got Demetrius Johnson, you got Jose Aldo. Those are like four that come to mind. Like, they're all kind of... What you said about Jose Aldo, you can kind of fill in the blank with the other three guys.
Yeah, but
you know what I mean?
he's in the class picture.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, if you want to say, like, most well-rounded, sure. I guess you could say about Jose Aldo is that he wasn't this powerful wrestler, but when he's used wrestling, it's worked. He's a legendary defensive wrestler. His takedown defense is ungodly. And not even, like, just sprawling and this and that, but if you got on his hips, he'd find a way to cut his hips and still land on his feet. We actually saw it tonight with Marlon Vera. When Marlon Vera was trying to choke him down, I remember at one point he cut his legs, and I don't know if it was DC or Bisbee, one of them was like, the athleticism is still in this guy's insane. I don't know. Jose Aldo in the post-fight show called out TJ Dillashaw. I think that was a perfect call-out. That's what I want.
I like it.
Okay. We're good. Sometimes the fighters give it for you. All right. One of my favorite moments of the entire night was not a fight. It was something we talked about on the preview show. Was Michelle Pereira doing breakdancing while Chaos Williams just stared across him with the most deadly glare in history. Michelle Pereira beat Chaos Williams by unanimous decision in probably the closest fight of the evening. I know there were some people who scored it for Chaos Williams. A lot of people scored for Chaos Williams. I looked over to MMA decisions. I don't think it was 50-50, but it was close to 50-50. How did you score the fight?
I scored that one. My goodness, I have to look at my own scorecard for that. I definitely gave it to Pereira, and I think I gave him 29. Okay, no, I did score that one. I scored that one for Williams, 29-28.
Okay. So you had 29-28 for Chaos Williams. I had a 29-28 for Michelle Pereira. This is what I'll say. If I'm okay with if Chaos Williams won it, I'll say this, and this is why I scored from Michelle Pereira. I thought he stole the second and third round right at the very end. And
yeah.
I didn't look at the judges' scorecards at all. I don't know what it is, but I'm assuming that's kind of similar to what they had.
Yeah, all three judges gave Pereira the second and third rounds.
Yeah. And to me, the third one was a little more convincing that he had that one, but the second one is the one, did he do enough in the last flurry to steal it around? I didn't think, Chaos Williams was, too far ahead. That, if you're playing, the Mario Kart game and you get the little burst, and I don't know if I'm not a video game person, but you hit the burst and you can kind of scoot ahead of the car in front of you.
Yeah.
Or when you're playing in the arcade. I feel like he had that enough. Chaos Williams wasn't so far ahead. He could hit that little burst at the end, and he kind of pushed himself ahead. What I'll say about this, though Michelle Pereira won, probably the biggest fight in his career, it was a fight. It was a good showing. Something still bothers me that I don't know if it would bother a lot of people, but tell me if I'm thinking too much in this. The fight was exactly how Michelle Pereira wanted to win, wanted the fight, and it was still an extremely close fight that a lot of people scored for his opponent. So that bothers me because his own lack of output, his own to me, I feel like he doesn't have the knowledge of or awareness of what's going on. That he was losing rounds that I don't think he thought he was losing. The first round, he wanted an outside kickboxing match. he got a low output outside kickboxing match and still wasn't doing enough to win the rounds. That's what really bothers me.
I'm with you on that. I'm someone who had Williams going into this one, and I had Williams soundly going into this one. I thought he was gonna just catch him with a straight punch in the middle of throwing something weird and flatline him. That didn't happen, and I still thought Williams won the fight, but I certainly am not screaming robbery like a lot of people whose opinions I respect gave the second and third rounds to Pereira. But win or lose, I didn't see anything from him that gives me any hope that, he would beat a top 15, top 20 welterweight, except by just happening to catch them with something crazy.
Yeah, so when I think about Michel Pereira, so he has a lot of skills. I mean, I think I actually feel it's built about both fighters. Like, I think we talked about like I like their skill sets. I still like both guys' skill sets. Just Michel Pereira, I'll bring it up again. It just his awareness bothers me. Now, as far as can he beat top 15 fighters, I think there is some guys in the top 15 that I would actually pick him against. But with that said, I think there's guys in the top 40 that I wouldn't pick to beat top 15 guys that I think he would lose to. Like a high output guy, I think he would lose to. Like maybe an Anthony Rocco Martin. But I might favor him against Michael Chiesa. As crazy as that sounds.
No, that makes sense, because Chiesa is not a high output guy in the feet either, and he may not be able to get it to the ground if he wants it there. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, we brought up the ground. You just brought it up. I'm glad you did because it really transitions well what I want to talk about. It's been 3 fights in a row now that we've seen Michel Pereira have a good offensive grappling game.
Yep.
And it's something that I wish he'd get away from, and he really has gotten away from the theatrics. He still does. Like, he was one time in the third round, he did some, like, weird, like, backward somersault kick thing that was an absolute waste of energy. But he's not burning himself out like he did against the Tristan Connolly thing. He's almost to the point where he uses the theatrics to, like, get guys thinking he's just a clown and then jabs him in the face. Okay. I still like this guy. I don't know. I guess I'm still on the pro side, but in a weird sense, he got his biggest win in him. I'm less high on him. Anything else you want to take? This was a lot of people's favorite fight heading into this fight.
It screamed we're going to get something wild. We actually didn't get anything wild. We just got pretty good fight between two prospects. Like, can't ask for much more than that. I did like that once they got into the third round, he got a pretty effortless takedown when he tried for it, and not just a takedown, but he landed in side control. Like, Williams escaped pretty quickly, but to have that in his back pocket, meaning Pereira, is something that would be handy to have as he moves up the ladder and starts taking on more well-rounded fighters. I
think he got it twice. Actually, I think he got him down again at the very end. And he ended up finishing the round on top. So I think he took him down twice.
Yep.
Before that was another big matchup in the rankings. We had former title challenger Marlon Vera take on Rob Font. Rob Font was out for a long time, and there was no ring rust on him. He was absolutely sensational. I don't know if anybody saw Moraes coming out wrestling. I think it was a brilliant strategy. It really was. And the reason why it was a brilliant strategy is he was no match for Rob Font on the feet. And when he got on the feet, it was one of those, like, your eyes jump out of your head. Rob Font's a New Englander. I've seen this guy fight on the regional scene. Like, I should be backing him. I didn't even pick him to win. You did. Man, like, I feel like I should apologize to all my New Englanders, like all my buddies. Like, man, what do you have to say about this?
Font. I expected Font to win. I picked him to win. He looked even better than I expected. All the kind of question marks that hover over a fighter returning from a long injury layoff were answered, except the one about gas tank because he didn't need it because he knocked him out inside of 4 minutes. But aside from that, no rust. He looked super sharp. He did get taken down, got taken down pretty. It was a big takedown. Mariah's just like it was fantastic takedown. Like you said, good strategy. But once they were exchanging on the feet, Font was so sharp. I know that it is now overrated to say that the jab is underused, but there are people that throw the jab, and then there are people that use the jab and like build their striking game off it. The beginning of the end was a jab that just stopped Moraes in his tracks and almost dropped into his butt.
Yeah, he had him stumbling back. So yeah, I know in the preview we talked about his jab. I said like he can't throw a jab enough. That was something Tyson Chartier, his coach, said. But this is a different jab. His last jab was a point scorer. It was a range finder. It was what most people think of a jab. This was a stinging jab. This was a power jab. Rob Font has got great length. Obviously, he's got. Yeah, not only was the jab, but there was speed on his. Like there was a big speed advantage on the feet. Obviously, going back to the jab was incredible. But also, it's been twice now, 2 fights in a row, where guys have taken him down, which is obviously not a good thing. But he's shown enough on both those fights to be able to scramble back to his feet, which is something I like to see. I mean, I think it wasn't that long ago. I think it was Pedro Munoz was taken down and he struggled to get back up. Now we're seeing a different one. I think Rob Font is a title contender. And I'm not saying he's going to win the title or anything like that, but he's in there now.
Oh, he's got to be.
Okay, so we're both on the same page. So one of the questions I was going to ask you, and I kind of forgot I was going to ask you, do you feel like this was this performance more about Font being a contender, or is it more about Moraes being done? And I was going to say, like, you only can pick one. I'm on the Font as a contender.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, Moraes is definitely on the decline, but that doesn't explain how Font did the things that he did so well.
Yeah, so one thing, we started at the beginning of the broadcast with the veteran, beating the upcoming prospect, and I asked you if it was a good thing. I think this was a good thing that Font won, because the amount of excitement right now going through Twitter and different social medias about Font would have been much bigger and better than anything Moraes would have got.
I'm totally with you on that.
All right, so what do we do? What do you do with Moraes? Is Moraes, like, you see he's completely done? I mean, he's lost 3 out of his last 4. He had that one fight against Jose Aldo. Yep. I know both me and you gave it to Moraes, but a lot of people thought Jose Aldo should have won that fight. Is there what do you do? I mean, should he change a weight class? Should he go up to featherweight? Like,
I mean, he'd be a stocky featherweight, but so is Alex Volkanovski. Just, I can't advocate putting him on the gunnery range with even bigger hitters, because knockout hitters are pretty uncommon at bantamweight. They're much more common at featherweight. You look down the top 10 at featherweight, and there's some hitters there. I think he should stay at bantamweight. I think he needs to take a step way down, all the way out of the top 10.
Yeah, I wouldn't even put him against top 15. I would put him. His next fight should be about midway through the prelims against like Brian Kelleher. Like, that's what I would do with him.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
All right, let's move on to the guy that I had a lot more hard, and we weren't planning on matchmaking more. It just kind of happened. Rob Font, I had a hard time matchmaking, simply for the point is everyone's booked. Like, all the guys ahead of him are booked. And we just agreed with Jose Aldo versus TJ Dillashaw. I don't have anybody else. Like, there's nobody else. I had to go below, which is not what I'm sure we want to do with Font, but I had to go down. Did you? I'll tell you who I have, and then you tell me why I'm wrong.
Okay.
When I went through the rankings, everyone was booked. I went with Merab Dvalishvili.
Yeah, I think Font has definitely earned something bigger than that, because even before he was gone with that injury, his last 2 wins were over Sergio Pettis and Ricky Simón. Pettis was a top 10 guy at the time, and Simón was like kind of on the outside of the top 15. I mean, Simón was probably ranked higher than Merab is right now at the time that they fought. I don't think he can take that kind of step back. I think maybe he should go have a Merry Christmas and wait for the winner of Sandhagen versus Edgar.
Yeah, when are they fighting? They're not fighting until February. You're talking about March, April, May, maybe April or May when the winner would get that, and then
or wait until one of them falls out with COVID is what I'm really saying.
Okay. Yeah, no. Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I totally am. But I mean, if you saying regular matchmaking, you're talking about sitting on the sidelines for another 4 or 5 months, and that's if they're health free, and that's for a guy who's been sitting on the sidelines for over a year now already.
Yeah.
I mean, when you go down the rankings, there's not a lot of options other than sit and wait.
Just I won't even suggest Aljamain Sterling because like the guy just needs to.
No. I mean, he's got the title shot.
He needs to have the title shot. But
yeah. Let me not that I'm suggesting a title shot for Rob Font, but how much fun would be Rob Font versus Pickett in a stand-up battle?
Oh, that would be insane.
and he could win that fight.
And if Dillashaw, if they do something else with Dillashaw or he's not ready to come back or whatever, I mean, Aldo versus Font sounds great to me.
Yeah, totally. If Dillashaw doesn't want, I can't see Dillashaw not wanting a Jose Aldo fight like that. Other than if he thinks he deserves an automatic first, crack at the title. Speaking of a stand-up affair, Greg Hardy was putting on a clinic on the feet. Looked fantastic. That was the best of Greg Hardy. Then we saw the worst of Greg Hardy, where he was completely gassed out on the ground with Marcin Tybura just peppering him with little shots until the referee didn't want to see anymore. Marcin Tybura won a second-round TKO. I tweeted out after the first round, something, I don't remember the exact words, but it was something like, "This Greg Hardy is a problem." And then I tweeted out something like, "Greg Hardy on the feet is a problem. Greg Hardy on the ground has a problem." I don't know what else to say.
I'm completely with you on this. This was a two true outcome fight. One of two things was going to happen. Hardy was going to blast him out early, or Tybura was going to just beat him late, probably on the ground. It was almost the first for a while, and then it was the second. I picked Hardy in this one, and I picked him by first round knockout, and I might pick him by first round knockout again if they fought in a week. Just that's the dynamic of the fight.
Yeah, I think that's something we said on the preview. I think we agreed on that. We're like, it's going to be one of these two options. When I was watching the fight, so this went almost to the very end of the second round. I was watching the fight in the first round, and I'm like, what the hell is Tybura doing? He's standing on the outside getting picked apart. I'm like, dude, throw a big haymaker causing Hardy to raise his hands and then close his distance. And he was not doing it. And then he was like, 9 minutes in, yeah, I'm sick of getting punched in the face. Let me do it.
Okay, and I will say this surprised me because we both agreed on the preview show that Tybura is a good grindy wrestler, but he's not the kind of guy that's just going to shoot a double and scoop you up and dump you. And then what does he do? He shoots a double, scoops Hardy up and dumps him. Like I was expecting him to just kind of trip an exhausted Hardy from the clinch against the fence.
Yeah.
But nope, he shoots a double, picks up all 285 pounds or whatever he was and dumps him. And once he was on the ground, that was like single digit UFC level awareness and defense on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm watching it and I'm just thinking like, dude, exactly what you said, like, wow, power double, like quick speed, nice entry. Like that's not what I expected. I just kept thinking, like when I was thinking about this fight, the lead up is, yeah, I wanted to pick Hardy, and I'm like, he's more athletic, he's speed, he definitely has, like, he's, the rise and improving between each fight, but I just kept thinking of Tybura pushing him against the cage, leaning on him, tiring, kind of punching him in the leg, and then eventually slowly grabbing a single and running the pipe with Hardy almost grabbing the fence on the way down, getting yelled at for grabbing the fence, and then he couldn't get up. But man, I don't know. So Greg Hardy, he's such a tough. I don't know, because obviously he's such good. Like his striking improvements is really good. Say what you want, it looks really good. His ground is terrible. He's still so young in the game, but when's the point where you go no, he has to be better by now?
Hey, I mean,
is it now?
I'm on record as saying I'm surprised that the UFC hasn't cut bait on this experiment yet. He's a liability and he's an expensive one at that. I am not looking right now, but I guarantee you he made more money tonight than Marcin Tybura did.
Oh yeah,
and Tybura, whatever else he may be, is an established veteran, borderline top 15, heavyweight in the UFC. And I'm sure Hardy made more money than he did tonight.
How many guys made more money than Hardy tonight? Jose Aldo, maybe Stephen Thompson.
Aldo, Thompson, Pettis.
Pettis. Yeah, probably Pettis. But Jeff Neal didn't make more money than him.
Nope, absolutely not.
Rob Font. I mean, maybe if you throw $50,000, whatever, straight base salary.
No. That's it.
Okay. Now you said that the UFC should cut Greg Hardy.
No, I said I'm surprised.
Okay.
That they're obviously still trying to find a way to keep him. Because in matching him with Tybura, my thought was this is the highest ranked fighter that Hardy has this good a chance of beating.
Yeah. Do you think there's any chance they said this is the guy he might be if he beats him, we'll continue down this path. If he loses to him, let's just move on. Do you think there's any chance?
I certainly think there's a chance, but when it's all said and done, he's still 4-3 in the UFC with 1 no contest. He's never lost 2 in a row. They've let some even worse than Greg Hardy heavyweights go on some losing streaks before they cut them. I mean, look no further than Jorgen De Castro.
Yeah. I mean, Jorgen making a tenth of what Greg Hardy did, if that.
Yeah.
But, man, a part of me wonders if we could see Greg Hardy on that 60, man cut list that they were talking about coming at the end of this month or maybe beginning of 2021. The one thing I think about is, the whole domestic violence and all this, and I shouldn't have to qualify my statement every time by saying yes, domestic violence is a terrible thing. And guys, I'm a police officer. No one in the MMA industry does more for domestic violence than I do. Any media, there's people on MMA media that's more outspoken about domestic violence. I've literally put people in handcuffs for domestic violence. I put them behind bars, so whatever. But I feel like the outcry against him is kind of waned. There's only a few people left kind of carrying that banner, which makes me they went through the hardest time with him, the biggest media outcry. Why stop now?
Unless, and this is going to sound super cynical of me, the outcry was actually one of the only reasons to pay any attention to him.
That's a great point. Honestly, that's a great point. If
he doesn't have that, he's just another guy on roster, and he's just another guy on roster whose fights aren't very exciting and who's already established that he has a hard ceiling against top 15 quality heavyweights.
You know what? I never thought of that angle. That's a great angle. It really is. I mean, you want a villain if he's not getting the villain hate. I mean, obviously there's so many people who hate Greg Hardy, but generally speaking, when he fights, his headlining, on ESPN is going further and further down the headlines.
Yeah. I'll tell a personal anecdote. I covered UFC on ESPN4. That was last July 2019. It was in San Antonio, and he fought Juan Adams. So he's fighting a Texan who explicitly asked for the fight because of his personal history of witnessing domestic violence. Said, I want to beat the shit out of this guy. Hardy destroyed Adams in 45 seconds. In fact, the first time my mom ever saw me on ESPN, I'm just like looking on with horror as Hardy lands like the 35th of 50 straight hammer fist to the side of Adams's head. It's like, hi, Mom. He gets on the mic afterwards. This place cannot stand him. I mean, just think about it.
Of course. Yeah.
And he just cuts a fantastic heel promo. And by the time he's done talking, it's just as loud, but it's half boos and half cheers. And at the moment that happened, I said, okay, he does have the potential to become a Brock Lesnar type of polarizing figure where people may just watch him because they want to see him get his ass kicked and they think he doesn't belong in the sport for different reasons than Brock. But all he would have to do is turn into at least a fringe contender. That hasn't happened.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. One thing I saw a lot of people on Twitter are saying, hey, why does the headline say Greg Hardy lost this? What about Marcin Tybura? And I was like, yeah, that's a good point. And then I just did it myself. As we just been talking about Greg Hardy for 10 minutes. We did not talk about Marcin Tybura for 1 minute. I think he's won 4 fights in a row.
He's won 4 fights in a row. It may be like the longest or second longest active win streak in the division right now.
I think they said the longest. Yeah, I think they said the longest.
That's true because Miocic even, just had the trilogy. There's a reason.
Yeah.
And it's not just because Hardy, is such a polarizing figure. It is because Marcin Tybura he is oatmeal. He's not exciting, win or lose. And he has the voice. He sounds like an old woman, like when he talks. Like every time he talks, I'm just shocked at how kind of high and raspy his voice is. Like, dude, God love him. Yeah. It's hard for me to believe he's 35 because for so long I was like, this is the great young hope of the heavyweight division. He's only 29, and six years later I'm still like, he's only 29.
Yeah. About 35, he still might be the great hope at the division.
Seriously, he is a good heavyweight.
Yeah, to me, to get excited about him, there still has to be a level of athleticism. He doesn't have that. No, I actually thought, even though he was getting picked apart by Greg Hardy, he looked in better shape than he usually is. He looked a little quicker. But there's just like a ceiling to this guy, and that ceiling is still way below like top 5 guys. Like he makes the top 10. Like, okay, that's like his ceiling. Best case scenario, he cracks the top 10.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. And I hate for myself for like using this as a springboard to go back the other direction. But another thing is that Hardy did not look in great shape. As soon as they started fighting, I was like, Hardy looks huge. Yeah. And he's always been a guy that needed to cut some weight to make 265. I mean, he famously came close to being the first person to miss the heavyweight limit. But it's not in his best interest to walk around at 295 pounds.
Yeah. So they said on I think Michael Bisping said that Hardy has admitted that he's 20 pounds too heavy. Well, stop admitting it and get in. Like, instead of cutting down to 265, you need to walk around at 265.
Completely agree, because his athleticism operates off that, and his gas tank would at least be better.
Yeah. And he's still, I mean, like the amount of power he has at 265 versus 285 is not going to be a big difference.
Especially the 20-pound difference is gut. Yeah. Like, he just had more around his middle. Like, again, I was in the room like a few feet away from like shirtless Hardy in last summer, and dude, he almost had a 6-pack. He was one of the most physically imposing fighters maybe the most physically imposing fighter I've ever been in the same room with.
Yeah, I covered the event for Sherdog when he had the whole inhaler gate in Boston, so I was up close, very in the hotel with him, and he's eating breakfast right next to me, and we did the interviews 3 feet from each other. He's a big, scary. There's a reason why this guy was an All-Pro in the NFL. Like, those guys are just different size guys. Anyways, speaking of cracking the top 10 and this and that, and one guy ascended all the way to the top as we headlining the prelims was Anthony Showtime Pettis. He had a very fun, very competitive back and forth fight with Alex Morono, where the former lightweight champion of the world won unanimous decision over Morono. He did say, this fight was at welterweight, he did say that he believes he's done at welterweight. He wants to go back down to lightweight. Whatever. That doesn't really matter to me. To me, the difference in this fight was adjustments. That's the word that just jumps out to me. Moreno had the game plan to beat Anthony Pettis, and that's high pressure and added some takedowns. He got it right away. He came right at the gate after Anthony Pettis forced him off his back foot. The only difference is he won the first round. There was some fun grappling exchanges. In the second round, Anthony Pettis made an adjustment, really got on his bike, started picking apart from range, a lot of movement. And then when the grappling exchanges happened, sometimes Pettis would actually be on the offense on it, but also he was just moving his hips well, and Moreno really couldn't capitalize on it. I know this is a fight that, it's a local guy for you. I don't have much to take from this. We had a former title challenger beat a guy that is a mid-card fighter in the UFC.
That's pretty much it. This was the only fight on the card that I didn't actually submit scores to MMAdecisions.com. But I agree with everyone, 29-28 Pettis. The second round was close, but, I mean, I wouldn't have been able to justify giving it to Morono. Given what you mentioned about what the difference was in this fight and, at least what part of the problem was in the headliner, how much of a difference did it make that Saif Saud was not there tonight?
That was literally the next question I was going to ask. That's the Fortis MMA went 0-2. Saif Saud, I mean, guys, you've heard me talk about this on this program on the preview. I interviewed him for the MMA Takeover show. I'm a huge fan. He's a great adjustment guy. He's also that motivator. Like, he could have a big hoorah motivation speech heading into the third, whatever it is. I don't know if it would have made a difference, but it wouldn't have hurt Alex Morono. And if anybody could have got something out of him, it might have been him. Now, in fairness, when they went to the corner and there was good advice, and I apologize, I don't remember the guy's name. Like, his advice was good. So I don't want to blame the coaches.
Yeah, but it had to throw both him and Neal off their game a little bit.
Yeah. So it has been brought. I think Mike Heck was talking about it. This was the last fight on the contract for Anthony Pettis in the UFC. I think that's kind of why we got a matchup like this. We talked about it on the previous show. I think this is the last time we see Anthony Pettis in the UFC. Agree or disagree? I know. Make a prediction for 2020. Anthony Pettis' next fight in the UFC is where? I'm sorry, next fight in MMA is where?
I'm going to be the contrarian and say he signs with the UFC again, but I could certainly see him fighting in Bellator 4 months from now.
That's where I was going. He's going to join his brother in Bellator. Remember, his brother was like a signing out of nowhere.
Yeah, and well, yeah. At least Bellator has Anthony's two divisions.
That's true. Yeah,
Sergio went to a place that doesn't have flyweight.
Yeah, that's a good point. The other thing about it is, Bellator has been improving their bantamweight division greatly. They've always had a pretty strong featherweight division. We talked about their recent run at light heavyweight. Lightweight is weak. You have Pitbull. I mean, who's next? Chandler's gone, and the other Pitbull brother, who knows what's going on with him,
and is not very good.
Yeah, he's pretty good, but yeah, there's a level that, all right, here's my example. If Pitbull gave up the belt, who's beating Anthony Pettis?
I don't know.
There might be someone who beats him, but my point is, Pettis is a title challenger day one in the Bellator. He's got a long run to the run in the UFC.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If he wants to wear any kind of belt again, dropping back down to lightweight in the UFC is not it. Diego Ferreira is hanging out on the outside edges of the top 15 and completely destroyed him.
Yeah, exactly. So the three things I think of is the pay will probably be pretty close. Second, if he wants to be a champion, he has a much better chance in Bellator, both at lightweight and welterweight.
Sure.
Though I would favor Douglas Lima over him, but still. And number three, like the exposure. He walks into Bellator and he becomes one of the faces of their organization. He walks into he stays in the UFC. He's fighting in the prelims or, first main card fight. These kind of things. To me, it's a no-brainer. But who knows? Maybe Bellator's not interested in him.
We'll see. I mean, they just signed 2 people from the UFC that I don't think have any more life left in them than Anthony Pettis does.
Well,
so.
yeah, especially after I asked Scott Coker about one of them and he denied being interested in him.
Oh, Scott.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Speaking of someone who has no life in him, Sijara Eubanks lost a unanimous decision to Penny Kianzad. I said that I still believe in Sijara Eubanks. I was waiting for the moment where I gave up on her. This is officially the moment. I have officially given up on Sijara Eubanks. She has a 500 record. Kianzad's on a little run now, which in this division automatically makes her a contender. I don't think she's going to win the title, but she's in the mix now.
She's in the mix. For what it's worth, she looked good. I mean, she nullified Eubanks' supposed strengths.
Yeah, I mean, Kianzad, you talk about this division. What does she need? 1 more win? 2 more wins? She's fighting for a title?
That's it. Women's bantamweight is wide open. It is very much like men's light heavyweight, where it was the glamour division for several years, but just that old guard has aged out, beaten each other up, moved to other promotions, moved to other weight divisions, and it is wide open for a new face. Even if I wouldn't favor her against anyone in the top 10.
No, but one thing I've said, and I'm in the minority with this, and I've said this many times, is when you add more divisions, like you have in the UFC, a lot of times you're gonna dilute the other ones, and it's why it seems like everyone's in favor of a 165-pound division, and I'm like, yeah, if you want to dilute 155 and 170, that's what's gonna happen. I remember when there was a time in MMA where adding divisions was like a sin. You bringing it up was like the worst thing ever. We wanted to be different from boxing. Anyways, I don't want to go down that rant. As far as the technical aspect of this fight, Sijara Eubanks gassed out again. She say what she wants, but she gassed out. She looked good early. She was wrestling, and her wrestling gassed herself out instead of Kianzad. And Kianzad stayed busier. And in the third round, she was just touching while Sijara was loading up on things and getting outpointed.
That's pretty much it. Not much to say other than that. It is slightly surprising and encouraging that Penny Kianzad is not even 30 yet. She's just been in the mix for so long between multiple different promotions that I expected her to be like 33 or 34. So,
yeah.
I mean, who knows? I mean, she has been gradually improving.
Yeah. Hey, good for her. Speaking of people gassing out, Antonio Arroyo versus Duran Win is one of the ugliest fights we've seen in a long time. Duran Win won a unanimous decision, rightfully so, in my opinion. The size difference in this fight was insane. When they were hugging each other at the end, they good fight, hug each other. Duran Win was up to his shoulder. It was it looked like a high school kid fighting a junior high kid.
It did, and man, this fight was terrible. It was terrible, and Arroyo, even at 195, his gas tank just sucks.
Yeah, you know what also bothers me about his gas tank? I mean, it's ridiculous, but the other thing happening is his fight IQ is horrendous. Because instead of being like, hey, let me get in the middle of the cage, no, let me just stay on that, near the cage, between that, black line in the cage. So when Duran Win shoots on me, I have nowhere to move. And it got to the point about, I don't know, his 6th or 7th time, he wasn't even trying to sprawl or underhook or anything. He was just, instantly falling to his back.
Oh, but yeah, by the third round, it's like he wasn't even... Yeah, you're right. He just wasn't even appearing to defend the takedowns. Wim was just It wasn't even like this Josh Koscheck just like rocket fast double leg anymore. He just kind of ran forward, grabbed his legs, and dumped him on the ground.
I mean, early in the fight, there was like a good like kickback, a couple of things he was doing really well. But yeah, then it just became to like, I'm just going to grab your feet and you're going to fall down. And you know what I kept thinking about? Like when Duran won, like in the third round when he won, I was thinking like, this is bad for him because now he's going to try it again at this weight class, or like maybe not 195 but 185 again. And you know what it looked like? This looked like when you ever see those videos where like the high school with the basketball kid like jokes with the wrestler, and he's like, yeah, let me try wrestling with you, and the basketball kid's a foot taller than the wrestler, and the wrestler just takes him down. Like that's what this looked like.
Absolutely.
And I don't know how Antonio Arroyo's crossover is or jump shot or anything, but his wrestling is probably equal to a basketball player.
Oh, I was gonna say, like, I don't know how his crossover is, but it's better than his sprawl.
Yeah, so
I can say that without having seen it.
Yeah, so this is like the fight that you show, like your dumb friend, like not even casual, but just that dumb friend who'd be like, Colby Covington would lose to LeBron James in a fight because look how much bigger LeBron James is. Like no, this is exactly what would happen. Like this right here, except it wouldn't be 12 takedowns; it'd be one takedown.
Yep.
Anyways, let's move on for the sake of it. Speaking of takedowns, Jillian Robinson tried taking Talia Santos down, and she didn't. And she could not get off from bottom as she got battered. Talia Santos, as DC mentioned, is one judge's decision away from being undefeated.
That's it.
And if she was undefeated, hold on, let me double check. Her loss was a split decision, correct?
It was a split.
Okay,
yep.
I just want to double check that. Yeah, so her loss was a split decision to Mara Barella, of all people. Santos looked good again. 2 fights in a row. She looked really good.
She did. She looked really good. She reduced Gillian Robertson to doing ill-advised things, just working for subs off her back while losing the round. But I don't think it was fight IQ. I just think it wasn't. She didn't have any choice.
Yeah, I agree. What happens with Jillian Robinson, and she's still only 25, so I keep saying that, but there's going to be a Greg Hardy point where it's like we can't just keep saying because of her age, we can't keep giving her a pass. She's a good grappler, but she's one-dimensional. She has no striking at all, and if she can't, if she doesn't have a significant advantage over somebody on the ground, she's going to lose. Like, am I making it too oversimplified? How do you say it? Oversimplifying it?
Well, it's not oversimplified. That's a fair assessment of her game right now, but it does miss out on a couple of nuances. One, well, she doesn't make as much money as Greg Hardy, and she's not the kind of PR liability. Also, being just 25, I mean, at 30, you could have said all those same things about Roxanne Modafferi. And
sure. Good point.
By the time she was 36, I mean, she was physically stronger, which, Gillian Robertson is not fully physically mature in terms of like skeletal muscle mass. And you can pick up those skills. Like Roxanne Modafferi throws meaner ground and pound than she ever did when she was, younger. She's developed it. She's never going to be a sensational striker, but she's a much better striker than she was. So Robertson has all the time in the world. She's in a division that needs people. And I think she's going to get some time to develop. She's relatively low risk, high reward for the UFC to just keep her around and keep giving her fights.
Yeah, so when I was talking about Jillian Robinson, I didn't mean like we should cut her or anything like that. I just meant like when we talk about her skill set. Like,
okay.
Like, does she get a pass? Like I keep giving, like we give Greg Hardy, and eventually I said, well, we got to stop giving him a pass on his skill set. He eventually has to improve in areas. I feel the same way. Like, yeah, she's 25, but she has to eventually improve in her stand-up.
Absolutely. I've seen nothing
deep
from her, even in her wins, to make me want to see her against the top 10 flyweight.
All right. And you talked about her, she could fully develop muscle. Speaking of fully developed muscles, Tafon Chukwu. I was trying to find a I was trying to find a segue as good as possible.
Excellent segue.
Chukwu beat Jamie Pickett by unanimous decision. So I'm going to talk about something. So he went down a weight class middleweight. That was not an issue. He made the weight class. He looked good. I like the broadcast team. I really did like the broadcast. Brandon Fitzgerald, Michael Bisping, Daniel Carter. I like that trio. I didn't like them in this one. I felt like we had a little bit of Joe Rogan going on. And what I mean by that is you find a narrative, and even if it's not there, you just keep talking about it, and you try to, like, will it into existence. And to me, they were, like, trying to will into existence Chukwu slowing down. And it's hitting the third round, and I'm like, where's this slowing down you're talking about? Like, his output's really good, and he's still hitting hard.
Oh, the third round was the most obvious 10-8. Like, because I went into it with the same narrative. The Rogan problem is the unwillingness or inability to move away from that narrative. I am not a commentator. It's an incredibly hard job. I'm not saying I could do it, but just sitting here and tweeting and talking with the rest of the Sherdog staff, by the end of the second round, I was like, wow, I'm surprised, because I expected Nchukwu to be the more tired man by this point, just because of the weight cut, and that has proven not to be the case. And nobody in the UFC booth could say that tonight.
Yeah. And now, obviously, as we're talking here, we both know broadcasting is a lot more than just talking about the fights. It's people talking to ears. You got to read this segment. You have to say this, say that. Yeah, so we understand. There's way more than people understand. I want to talk about Chukwu for a second. 3 things really jumped out at me besides the power. Like, everyone keeps talking about his power. 3 things I really liked in this fight that I saw. His ability to go 15 minutes, we just talked about. That's obviously a great sign. I love that he had some foot trips, like some offensive foot trips. He did it, I think, 2 or 3 times. And then I also liked when Pickett did get him down briefly, his ability to get right back up to his feet. Like, those are all, to me, 3 very, very promising signs. Now, I know most people expected a quick knockout, but to me, this might be even more impressive than if he knocked him out in a minute. Like, to me, like, this answered questions that if he knocked him out in a minute, like a guy like Francis Ngannou, we still have questions about Francis Ngannou. Like, he answered questions to me.
I completely agree there. If he'd blown Pickett out of the water in 90 seconds, which is what I actually expected to happen, I wouldn't necessarily feel any higher on him as a prospect. In fact, I think I said on the preview, my biggest suspense is overseeing how easily he makes 185. That means more to me than anything that actually happens in the cage, assuming he wins. I was wrong, because seeing him have enough gas not only to be in the fight in the third round, but to be pulling away. Like, if this was a 5-round fight for, like, the CFFC championship or something, I think he would have finished Pickett.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I think that's a good assessment. Now, so he answered questions before by making weight. He answered questions by that weight class, that weight cut not affecting him. He did just beat Jamie Pickett, so we're not going to get too excited about it. And I want to very clarify what I was talking about Francis Ngannou. I am not trying to compare him to Francis Ngannou and his knockout ability and being a top 5 guy in the world in his weight class. Like, I'm not saying that. I'm just talking about question marks about their game. Speaking about a question mark about someone's game, no one can question Jimmy Flick's submission ability, because he pulled off a fight submission of the year candidate in his flying triangle against Cody Durden. I'm going to say this right off the bat. I don't think it's going to win many. Like, I don't know if it's going to win ours. I've actually already submitted my vote for submission of the year, and I don't want to change it. Actually, I'll tell you what my submission, my pick. I picked AJ McKee's submission of Darren Caldwell.
Hey, so did I.
Okay, so. And
I think I'm writing that one, so I hope it wins. Okay,
so as far as suspension goes, I don't know what the rest of the staff is picking, but we know that Darren Caldwell's submission, Darren Caldwell gets submitted by AJ McKee, is up 2-0 in the votes. So, all right.
Yeah.
And those awards will be coming out shortly, so make sure you head over to Sherdog.com to find out who the winners are. Anyways, the reason why I don't think a flying triangle gets it is the fact how long it took to finish. Sure. If he jumped up, called him as soon as they hit the ground, submitted him like you do with a flying armbar, to me it's probably surpasses AJ McKee. The other reason why I liked AJ McKee's better is that it's so rare. In fact, we were like, what the hell just happened? We've actually, I mean, no, don't get me wrong, a flying triangle is extremely rare too, but we've actually have seen it happen before. Like, I don't remember when I've ever seen this AJ Mckee submission. I'm sure it has, and Jordan Breen can point it out in some random. Oh, it happened at the Tribal Force 3 in Oklahoma in 1998. You know, but I'm talking about like in the UFC high level. We've never seen anything like that. And I know AJ Mckee was in Bellator, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
I don't know why I went on a big rant, a submission of the year, but Flick is fun. Can I just say that? Like, he is fun. What do you have to say about this fight?
It played out kind of like I expected. I think we both said this, but I know I definitely did. Durden is a big, burly flyweight. Like, he's a big dude for flyweight. And so I expected him to really give Flick problems just with sheer physicality, just early on in the fight, but to gas out and eventually get snared in something. We both had Flick by submission in this. When you had him in the second round, I had him in the third. So I didn't expect it to go like this quickly, but the general dynamic where, yeah, Durden's size and strength was obviously giving him pause early on, but he caught him with something sassy. Hey, I mean, give me more of that. It's neat that he looks a little like Dustin Hazlett, because
that's a good call.
Catching something cool and unexpected on dudes that are 10 times the apparent athlete you are. Hey, yeah, I'm here for it.
So if we can get him to throw a whizzer and then jump the whizzer to an armbar, that's always the thing I think of Dustin Hazlett. So this is what I'll say about Flick. So it's always fun to add a new flyweight. Someone has excitement, someone has finishing ability, someone has submission sense. He's going to struggle against the highest echelon guys, particularly that really stand out to me, like decorated grapplers, like obviously the champion Davison Figueiredo. He's nowhere near to a title shot, but obviously him, Juicio Formiga, Alejandro Pantoja. Like, he's going to struggle against those guys, but it's going to be fun the road up to those guys.
And he's got a way to go until then. I mean, we're talking about a guy who just won his debut off the Contender Series.
Oh, yeah.
And we're listing like top 5 fighters.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like, the road up to those guys is going to be fun as hell. Like, imagine him and Brandon Royval. Like, how fun would that be?
Yeah. I mean, just that would be bananas, because Royval, obviously not quite to the same level, but he loves that kind of game. Like, just a wild scramble where he's looking for submission opportunities.
Yeah, him versus Tim Elliott would be fun. Anyways, speaking of fun, there's nothing more fun than watching Carlton Minus fight.
Oh,
this is all I'll say about this. I'll say one thing and I'll let you take away whatever you want. Christian Jagos beat Carlton Minus by unanimous decision. The guy took the fight on 2 days' notice. Good for him for getting himself a pretty easy paycheck right before Christmas. Carlton Minus sucks.
Yeah.
I apologize. I shouldn't say he sucks. I'm sorry. I shouldn't say he sucks, but he's not a good fighter.
Well, sure, because if he made it to the UFC at all, he is one of the 3% of best fighters on the planet.
You're right. I shouldn't say he sucks. You're right.
He could whoop most of the lightweights in my hometown right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I will say this, kind of like the opposite of what I said about Jose Aldo a little while back, where I'm like, there's nothing that he doesn't do at an extremely high level. Not only am I not sure Carlton Minus is UFC material, I'm not sure there's any single thing he does at a UFC level.
I agree. Like, nothing stands out. He's a point kickboxer who has no power, not very technical.
And just got ragdolled by Giagos on 2 days' notice.
Terrible wrestler. Yeah. There you guys have it. We have covered all 12 fights. Let's get to some of the fun stuff. We have the Bulls and the Bears, the cut list, and our grade. Want to do the cut list first?
Yeah, let's do the cut list.
All right. The reason why I want to do the cut list first is because we have the perfect transitioning. I got two guys. The most obvious is Carlton Minus. I mean, you took on Jagos is mid. I wouldn't say. I don't want to say low level UFC because he's got some wins. He's mid tier guy. on 2 days' notice in like a 10-8 round. I'm saying cut Carlton minus.
Absolutely agreed.
Okay, the other guy that I'm going to cut is Antonio Arroyo. I mean, the guy lost to someone like 2 feet shorter than him.
I completely agree as well. I mean, he just lost to somebody who might not win another fight in the UFC.
Yeah. I had another one. I originally wrote this person's name, but then I crossed it out. I was going to say Sajar Eubanks, but that division is so shallow. You can't really cut anybody.
Nope.
Do you have anybody else?
No, that was it. Those were my 2.
All right. Let's do the Bulls and the Bears. The Bulls and the Bears, if you're not familiar with it, is a stock market reference. A bull market or a bull stock is when something's on the rise. A bear market or a bear stock is when something's on the decline. So you want to be a bull, you don't want to be a bear. We can pick up to 3, kind of like hockey, where we go like 3, 2, 1, building up suspense. Do you want to do the Bulls and the Bears first, and do you want to go first, or do you want to go second?
Oh, let's do the Bulls first, and I am happy to go first.
Okay, good.
Okay, so my number 3 Bull, Taila Santos. She's answering the questions about her. She does have that one loss, and while the booth made a point that it was a split decision, so she's one judge's card away, she flat out lost that fight. She lost that fight to a not very good fighter, but since then she's looked very good. She's just, and the reasons that she's looked good, she's like physically strong, great athlete, turning out to have a well-rounded skill set. She kind of presents as a striker, but clearly more than capable of taking care of herself on the ground against, one of the trickier submission specialists in that division. All of a sudden, she's a bit of a problem going forward. And in the inverse way of how we were talking about how Robertson will have plenty of time to develop, probably, Santos, if she keeps winning, like, she's going to go up that ladder pretty quickly. So she's my number 3. Number 2, Rob Font. Talk about answering some questions about yourself. All this guy needs to do is stay healthy, because he fought in December 2018, December 2019, December 2020. These are fast-moving waters, and the division and the matchmakers are going to forget about you if you can't fight more than once a year. But that's the only piece that needs to fall into place, because he's doing this incredibly difficult thing to do where he's fighting once a year, but not only does he not have apparent, cage rust, he's getting better in between these appearances. I would never have picked him to beat Marlon Moraes 2 years ago. Not even this Marlon Moraes, not accounting for how much better Moraes was 2 years ago. Font has gone from being a good and very exciting fighter to being a very good, exciting fighter. It's a subtle difference, but I didn't think he was ever going to be a title challenger in this division, and he's well on his way there.
Yeah.
Number 1, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Talk about, once again, answering some nagging questions and doubts about yourself.
Yeah.
We talked about it at length at the beginning of the show, so I won't repeat it, but simply encapsulate that he took a very good, very dangerous striker and made him look completely ineffectual for 25 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like a no-hitter, if in baseball terms. I'll give my 3. I actually had a bunch for the Bulls. I usually write down my list as I go, and then I get to race and pick my top 3. So I kind of struggled. But my number 3, the win does not make him go up the rankings much, or does not do much for his overall crowd. But I'm going to give him a lot of credit anyways. Christian Giagos took the fight 2 days ago. Good for him to know that he could sucker this guy into taking a fight at 160, get himself a free paycheck 6 days before Christmas. Good for him, my man. Buy your kids some good toys, so if he has kids or whatever. My number 2 is Jimmy Flick. This guy, he's in the UFC flyweight division, which is a shallow division, which means he's not that far off from a rise, to a ranking. He's got 4 straight submission wins. He's exciting. He's got himself a candidate for submission of the year. Jimmy Flick is my number 2, and my number 1 is a guy that was on your list. How could it not be Rob Font? I mean, he's on a 3-fight winning streak, out for a year, former title challenger, and just it was one of those drop your drink on the ground moments. It was that incredible. Let's go over to the Bears. This is what you don't want to be. This is people whose stocks are going down. I will go first this time. I will go with my number 3. My number 3 on the decline. I'm going to go 3A and B. 3A is Antonio Arroyo. I mean, he lost 2 fights in a row in the UFC. Completely gassed out. Lost to a guy a foot shorter than him. My 3B is Duran Win, who actually won. I think it's the first time. I don't know if this is the first time I ever put someone on the win and loss, but this fight was terrible. But the reason why I want to put him on the list, I want to shout out a guy on Twitter. He's a listener of the show. His Twitter name is Hilo_312. He tweeted out to me. He said, "Make sure you put both of them on the bear list." So there you go, Hilo_312. They both made the list. Thanks for listening, buddy. My number 2, Sijara Eubanks. She's now 6-6 overall in her career. This is a girl that was actually been scheduled on 2 different times to fight for the UFC title. She's lost 2 in a row. She is, in my opinion, closer to being cut from the UFC than she is to getting a title shot. Times have not been good. And number 1, how could it not be Marlon Vera? He's lost 3 of his last 4. Some people believe 4 of his last 4. 2 brutal first-round knockout stoppages in his last 2 fights. The Magic Man is not going in the right direction. Who are your Bears?
Oh, man. First of all, I completely am picking up what our friend on Twitter is putting down because, yeah, just get both of the halves of that fight out of my face forever. I will put Win in my Bears as well. When you're going into a fight at a catchweight that's been expressly put together for you to help you get a win, it's almost a no-win situation, no pun intended. But if all you manage to do is just outlast a guy who has no wins in the UFC to a decision in the worst fight of the night, that's not a good look. I have the feeling he might be on a pretty short rope going forward from here. Like, I have the feeling that if he doesn't fight at 185 and win in his next fight, he's gone. Number 2, Greg Hardy. Reasons we already mentioned, but this is now twice that they've tried to give him a step up. And both times he's just lost in humiliating fashion. I mean, talk about your no-hitters.
Good point. Yep.
Alexander Volkov pitched a no-hitter against Greg Hardy. And then Tybura. I mean, just he made him look like D1 Tybura, just like shooting through the hips and getting the power double. Yeah, Hardy's stock is down. That's twice now that he's had a shot at a top 10, top 15 type guy. Both times he's fallen completely short. And while he's getting better at some things, there are other things that he is not getting any better at. I will reiterate that that might have been the most hapless ground defense I've seen from a UFC level heavyweight in 10 years. And my last one, and don't really mean to put this number 1 in terms of how severe, but just because I'm getting to him now, Marlon Vera. This was definitely a chance for him to level up and kind of announce himself as a contender to the division. But instead, not only did he lose, he lost a fight that was in his power. It was in his grasp to win. If you told me going in that it was 1 round apiece going into the 3rd round, I would have placed money on Vera. But he lost almost the only way he could. Like, the easiest, most obvious route to victory for Aldo would have been to get a takedown early and then really never let him up, and that's exactly what happened. So, I mean, I can't call that anything other than stock down from Marlon Vera. He'll probably get more chances. He's young. He's exciting. But this was definitely a setback.
Yeah, I agree. He's kind of showed where he is, in my opinion. Let's get to the grade. I'll go first on the grade. I'm going to give a C+. Nothing spectacular. The prelims kind of sucked. The reason why I didn't go lower is I thought the main event co-main kind of delivered. I thought Stephen Thompson's performance was, while the main event wasn't very competitive, I thought Thompson's display was fun to watch. I thought the co-main event had exciting moments. A couple other things why it helped, obviously the flying triangle by Jimmy Flick. I also like that a guy like Tavon Chukwe had, showed some promise in the middleweight division. So I think there was some to give it an okay score. So I give it a C+. How did you score it?
I'll give it a C. There wasn't a single fight on this 12-fight card that was more than good. Not even a very good fight. Yeah. A couple of good individual performances, but that's about it. It was just another card.
Yeah, I mean that was a good point. But there was no fight of the night, so that should tell you everything about how good the fights were. There you guys have it, guys. We have completely recapped UFC Vegas 17, UFC Thompson versus Neal. That's the last show of the year for our UFC recaps. We will not be returning this show until January 16th. I think it's the part 2 of the cartel. The New England cartel is Calvin Kattar gets his main event title shot against former featherweight champion of the world, Max Holloway. And then it's going to be like right out the gate. I think there's like 3 cards all close. I think there might be that like midweek card in the lead up to McGregor. Poirier, there's like a midweek.
Yep, we have January 16th, 20th, and then 23rd.
Is it 20th?
So yeah, we've got a third.
20th is Edwards Shamaev?
That is where they have. Actually,
no.
I don't know if it's officially on there yet.
Oh, okay.
I know. I think that's what they wanted to push it to. Like I see the news report there from a couple days ago.
Sure.
But I don't know if it's
that's the rumor.
If it's confirmed yet.
The rumor.
Yeah.
Okay. But anyway, so as far as that, there will be other shows on this network for the rest of the year. But I believe I can speak for myself and for Ben. I know I can speak for everybody at Loudmouth. I'm sure I can speak for everyone at SureDog Radio Network and SureDog.com. We want to wish everybody who's listening a Merry Christmas, a Happy Holidays, a Happy New Year, anything you're celebrating. I hope you enjoy it. Have a great time with friends and family. Obviously, do it safely during this COVID span. Ben, anything you want to say?
That's it. Just thank you for listening, and we'll be back in a couple weeks.
And happy holidays to you. Merry Christmas and all that good stuff, buddy.
To you as well, sir. Thank you.
See you guys. We'll see you in 2021 for the Shillan and Duffy recap show.